Okay, welcome everybody to this first webinar in a series of 3 webinars that's being put on by Microsoft and Milestone Consulting Group. The first webinar today is called What's New in Microsoft Project Professional for Office 365. It's basically going to be a 1-hour tips and tricks session. We're going to focus on some of the new features in the desktop tool. We have 2 additional webinars that are scheduled for February and March. We will show a slide at the end that describes the dates for those, as well as an MPUG session that will be a more in-depth version of the resource engagements functionality that we're going to cover today at a high level. Molly Keel is the Microsoft point of contact for you for product-related things. So if you've got questions about trials or how to obtain project online, things along those lines, you can reach her. Her contact information will be included in a slide at the end of the deck as well, as well as Dan Ranier's contact information and my contact information. So I want to introduce Dan Ranier. He's a partner at Milestone, a director of the education group at Milestone Consulting Group. He's been with us since 2003. He's probably the foremost expert in Microsoft Desktop project in the country. He's a great evangelist for the product. Has spent quite a bit of time speaking at national and international events related to Microsoft Project Desktop primarily. So without further ado, I'm going to kick him off. I just want to mention quickly, this is a re-recording of the original webinar. The first recording showed only the chat window, and so it felt like it wasn't worth sending out. We were going to do this re-record, and we're also going to include the answers to a couple of the questions that got asked at the end. There will be no chat window here, so we'll be missing a few little items that appeared in the first webinar, but we're going to get the majority of the content and the questions addressed at this point. So Dan, take it away.
All right, thanks, Dave. So welcome everybody for attending. Again, my name is Dan Ranier from Milestone Consulting Group. As Dave mentioned, I'm a partner at Milestone. I'm also a person responsible for creating Milestone's YJTJ process for Microsoft Project. As Dave mentioned, I've done a fair amount of guest speaking over the years on project management in Microsoft Project. I've done some writing over the years as well, and I've been working in this space for over 24 years now. So hopefully our collective years of experience will shine through for you today. A little bit of information about this particular session. This session provides an overview of new features in Microsoft Project 2016 presented via Project Online. Please note that with Project Online, new features may be added at any time by Microsoft. At the conclusion, 3 recent examples will be discussed. Finally, due to the short duration of this session, please note that there is not enough time to cover every aspect of each new feature. Our agenda for today is to talk about flexible timelines, resource engagements, tell me, new Office themes, other items that are new, and a few recent adds. So let's go ahead and get started. And we'll begin by talking about flexible timelines. The new flexible timelines give you more control over communicating the status of your projects. In Microsoft Project, all you have to do is select Insert Timeline Bar, and you can add additional timeline bars, and you can have up to 10 timeline bars per project. Prior to Project 2016, you just had 1 timeline bar with the new timeline functionality that was added in Project 2010. But now you can insert new timeline bars up to a maximum of 10. And for each timeline bar, you can now set a date range, right, for the timeline bars. So after you insert, let's say, 3 timeline bars and set date ranges for each timeline bars, it might look something like this. Okay? So let's go ahead and actually do a demo in Microsoft Project on flexible timelines. So I'm going to bring up Microsoft Project and take you to my new software project. I'm going to drag and select Phase 1 through Phase 1 Complete. And I'll go ahead and right-click on that selection and choose Add to Timeline. So there's my first timeline bar. I'll go ahead and click in the timeline to activate it. Navigate up to the Format tab on the ribbon in my Timeline Tools, and I'll go ahead and click on Insert Timeline Bar or Add Timeline Bar. I'll grab the divider between the Gantt chart and the timeline and drag it down. Select Phase 2 through Phase 2 complete. And I'll go ahead and activate that second timeline bar. And I'll right-click on this selection and choose Add to Timeline. And then one more time, I'll activate the timeline by clicking in it. And I'll choose Insert Timeline Bar. I'll select that third timeline bar. And then in the Gantt chart view, select Phase 3 through Phase 3 complete. I'll right-click that selection and choose Add to Timeline. And now I have my 3 timeline bars. I'll click the first timeline bar, and I'll navigate up to the Format tab on the ribbon, and I'll choose Date Range. And I'll go ahead and set custom dates of 2/1/16 through 2/11/16. Click OK. I'll select the second timeline bar, choose Date Range, and I'll set custom dates 2/4/16, 2/16/16, and click OK. And then I'll click the third timeline bar and choose Date Range. And I'll go ahead and set custom dates of 2/9/16, 2/19/16, and click OK. I could insert up to 7 more timeline bars, but for this presentation, I'll just choose these or show these 3. And then if you like to do some formatting and changing font size and changing colors, you can eventually get your project schedule to look something like this from the timeline bar perspective. I'm going to go back to PowerPoint. And move on. Now, flexible timelines functionality has also been added in PWA. I'm not planning on showing this today in PWA actually, because in the Project Online instance that I have, this functionality has not been added to it yet. In a different version that I had, you can see from the ribbon here in PWA that the add timeline bar functionality and the set date range functionality was here. Right? Microsoft is slowly but surely releasing new functionality into PWA through the Project Online environment, and I don't think it'll be too long before you'll actually see this functionality in PWA. Okay, but again, this is the PWA ribbon, the timeline tab on the ribbon, add a timeline bar, set custom date ranges, and right in PWA, you'll be able to see multiple timeline bars. And moving along, the next new feature that we'll talk about, and this is really the major upgrade to the Project 2016 environment, is resource engagements. Resource engagements is intended to assist with ensuring that resources are used effectively and efficiently. Resource engagements will replace resource plans. Please note that resource engagements requires Project Online or Project Server on premises. In PWA, from a server settings perspective, under the additional server settings area, you must select the option to enable new resource management features. Doing so replaces resource plan functionality. Okay? So if you were to go out and deploy Project Server today, resource engagement functionality is not yet there by default, but it will be relatively soon. It is Milestone's understanding that later in 2016 in Project Online, resource plan functionality will no longer be available. Current subscribers will be automatically migrated to resource engagements. Some general information about resource engagements. Resource engagements are made to projects, not tasks, and that's very important to understand. You can have multiple resource engagements per project. You can name a resource engagement such that it correlates to a task, but that's it. In Microsoft Project, a new view has been added named Resource Plan. This view may be accessed from the Resource Views group on the View tab. Take note of the Resource Plan Tools context-sensitive tabs when the Resource Plan view is displayed. So how do you create a resource engagement? When creating a resource engagement for Microsoft Project, the resource must be a part of the project team. With the Resource Plan view displayed, from the Engagements tab, Engagements Group, you click Add Engagement. From the Engagement Information dialog box, fill in engagement information, and then click OK. Take notice of the engagement status at this point in a draft state. Once you've created a resource engagement, the next step is to submit a resource engagement for review and acceptance. So from the Engagements tab, Engagements Group, click Submit, and then select from one of the Submit options. Once submitted, the status bar will show Submit completed successfully. And now you can take notice of the engagement status in a proposed state. So let's go ahead and give this a try now in Microsoft Project. I'm going to take you back to Microsoft Project, my systems upgrade project. The first thing that I stated is when creating a resource engagement from Microsoft Project, the resource must be part of the project team. So I had navigated here to Resource in the Insert group, clicked Add Resources, and went to Build Team. And through the Build Team from Enterprise dialog box, I added myself to the project team. In PWA, if you create a new resource engagement, it's nice that you don't have to actually have a resource be a part of the team. You can add them just by creating the engagement. But from within Microsoft Project, the resource must be a part of the team. Now, from the View tab on the ribbon in the Resource Views group, I'll click on Resource Plan. And now from the Resource Plan Tools context-sensitive tabs, I'll navigate to the Engagements tab, and on the far left-hand side, click Add Engagement. Now, from the Engagement Information dialog box, I'll go ahead and give this engagement a description. An engagement start date. And an engagement finish date. Making the decision to submit a request for 50% of the resource's time to this engagement. And then if you want, you can add some comments. And now all I have to do at this point is simply click OK. So take notice of the engagement status at this point. It's in a draft state. If you take a look out at the time phase grid, for the time period that I've selected, I have proposed this resource for this project at 50%. Now it's my job to go ahead and submit this resource engagement. So from the Engagements tab, In the engagements group, I'll click submit. And then you can choose from one of the submit options. I'll go ahead and just choose submit all engagements. I just have one. And that engagement is being submitted. And down here in the status bar, you'll notice that it says submit completed successfully. Take notice now of the engagement status. It is now changed to proposed. That is how you create and submit an engagement. Remember, this is not a task assignment. This is just a resource plan request, right? A resource engagement request for a particular resource at a stated FTE units value of 50% over a period of time. So I'm going to take you back to PowerPoint. And continue on. Now imagine being a resource manager, okay? I'm sorry, I have a little bit of information here to cover first. I got ahead of myself. Once you submit an engagement for Microsoft Project, it's important to note that there is no undo. Any recent changes to the project schedule not saved prior to the engagement submit are saved upon the engagement submit and cannot be undone. So now that I've done my job as the project manager, I'll put my resource manager hat on. Once a resource engagement has been submitted by the project manager, it may be reviewed and acted upon in PWA by the resource manager. In PWA, resource engagement reviews and approvals do not take place through the Approval Center, and there are no email notifications regarding submitted resource engagements. So in PWA, from the Resource Center, the resource manager's job is to select a resource or resources, and from the Resources tab, Navigate Group, click Resource Request. From the Resource Request page, review Resource Engagement Request, take notice of the engagement state, or as it's called in Microsoft Project status, currently proposed. If the proposed state is to be accepted, select the resource request, then from the Engagements tab, Update Group, go ahead and click Accept. From the Confirm Accept dialog box, if necessary, add any comments, and then click OK. And then from the Resource Request page, simply review Resource Engagement Request. At this point, take notice of the engagement state. Now is committed. So we'll go ahead and demo this now in PWA. So as a resource manager from the Resource Center, again, my job is to select a resource and navigate to Resource Request. From the Resource Request page, review Resource Request, select an engagement, and if you're ready to accept it, go ahead and click Accept. After you click Accept, from the Confirm Accept dialog box, add any commentary that's needed. When finished, simply click OK. And now at this point, notice that the current state has been committed, and now you can see in the time phase grid, proposed and committed work based at a 50% committed allocation. Again, these are not task assignments, these are simply agreements between the project manager and the resource manager to commit a resource to a certain percentage of time within a given project. I'm going to navigate back to PowerPoint. So the next step, from a project manager's perspective, is to refresh a resource engagement. In Microsoft Project, if I had not closed the Microsoft Project schedule yet, and I had an idea that resource managers were reviewing requests and accepting engagements, right from the Engagements tab in the Engagements group, I can simply click Refresh. Once refreshed, the status bar will show engagements refreshed successfully. And then I can take notice of the engagement status, now changed to committed, and out in the time phased grid, I can see the committed units based on the accept of the resource manager. So I'll take you into Microsoft Project now, and we'll go ahead and do exactly that. So right from the Engagements tab, in the Engagements group, all I have to do is click Refresh, and this will refresh engagements based on any changes made. You notice down in the status bar it says engagements refreshed successfully. The engagement status is changed to committed, and I can see the committed units in the time period of the request. Take you back to PowerPoint. And continue on. It is important to note that in Microsoft Project, the options for calculating resource utilization have been moved to the project information dialog box. Historically, with resource plan functionality, this choice of where resource utilization is calculated from was made in PWA, not in Microsoft Project. In other words, the engineers at Microsoft have made a decision that the decision for calculating resource utilization should come from the Microsoft Project author or the project manager. So this is something you'll have to consider very carefully in deploying resource engagements. There's also a new Heatmap view that's included in PWA. And as it states here, view the discrepancies between resource capacity and committed engagements for these resources. The Heatmap only looks at resource engagements. It does not look at task allocations. It simply looks at capacity and committed engagements for resources. Take time to study the resource engagements Heatmap. This is a new addition in PWA. Another new feature that was added in Microsoft Project is Tell Me. Tell Me assists project managers with identifying exactly the functions they want to perform. Okay? So just to the right-hand side of the Format tab, you will see Tell me what you want to do. So imagine clicking on that and then typing in status date. And then Microsoft Project provides a number of options for you to select from. So imagine at this point clicking on status date. This isn't navigating to a help file. This will navigate you directly to the status date dialog box where you can go ahead and input a status date and then click OK. So this is not help in the traditional sense of Microsoft Project help files where you just read about fields, features, and functions. This is a navigational tool that basically says, tell me what you're thinking about, and I'll present you menu options that you can click on to navigate directly to a certain place in Microsoft Project, although you could click on Get Help. New Office themes let you choose how Project appears on the screen. When Project 2013 came out, the theme was kind of a whitewash type environment, but in 2016, the colorful theme has been added back in. The dark gray theme is a choice. The default is colorful. That's what I've been presenting today. Other items. Updates available. This is a general office update message that you'll see up above the Gantt chart view up by the ribbon. It basically just tells you when updates for Office are ready to be installed. Okay? I want to be careful of this, but that banner will appear from time to time. The ribbon is not all in caps. Nice change. My add-ins is what you'll now see as opposed to my apps. Online status next to name option to display or not display someone's online status. That option is a nice add in Project 2016. If you're using the link and you don't want to see somebody's online status, you can deselect that option. And then as I mentioned earlier, with Project Online, new ads are to be expected. You can wake up one morning and fire up Microsoft Project and you'll find new features and functionality. It's not something that happens daily. There's not a lot of them. But as you can see here, here's some recent ads. From the time I put this presentation together to this point, there were updates for notifications, project IDs, custom field limit increase. You're just going to have to make sure you keep an eye on those things that are added randomly. Any questions?
So Dan, we had a couple questions in the chat window in the original recording. I'm just going to kind of reiterate those and have you discuss them. And I've got a couple comments too, just from things that I wanted to talk about based on your presentation that came to mind. So the first question was, a person asked, how could there be any variance in the heat map when it's just showing engagements? And I think you covered that in the session, but it might be worth covering it again for people who had the same kind of question.
Okay, so the heat map, let me go to the Resource Center, and I will change my view to my resources, and I'll select these 5 resources and head to capacity planning. And here's the capacity engagement heat map. So this heat map is only designed to show information for capacity and committed engagements. And that's it. This heat map view does not take into consideration, at this point in time, task assignments from projects. This capacity engagements heat map is basically version 1.0 of the heat map. What changes might come about in the future, I don't know. Okay? But this is simply designed to show you capacity and committed engagements for the resources that you have selected. Right? So if you took a look at, say, Allison here, for example, right? She has committed resource engagements 50% and 25% respectively for operations work and support work. Well, we know that her capacity in the system is 1 FTE. And these two combined add up to 0.75. So based on a capacity of 1, and knowing that the threshold settings up here on the ribbon are to show blue for anything under 10%, which 75% would qualify, because that's 25% under 1, she would be in blue. For Tina, who has 35% committed engagement for operations work and 85% committed engagement for support work, okay, that exceeds the overbuy of 10%, 110% that would be. She's at 120%, so she's red. Jason is perfectly allocated at 100% from a resource engagement committed perspective between operations work and support work. And that's why his color here is at green. So this heat map, remember, does not take into account task assignments. It only looks at committed resource engagements. If you want to look at views of information that consider project assignments, you'll want to change your view to either resource utilization or resource utilization by project. I'll select the first one, resource utilization. This particular graph will include task assignments and resource engagements, but that depends on settings back here in Microsoft Project. If I navigate to project information, what displays in those graphs is dependent upon the option that you choose here. Okay? So just remember, the heat map is version 1.0, and the heat map view only considers committed resource engagements.
That makes sense, Dan. So if a person within their own project overcommits a resource that they have there to engagements beyond their actual capacity, it will show in red. That makes perfect sense. Thanks.
Yeah, that's with engagements, but not task assignments.
Right. Absolutely agree. Yep. Okay. Perfect. The other question was, does Portfolio Analyzer use resource engagements? And the answer to that question is yes. If you're familiar with Project 2013, Project 2010, you'll remember that within the Portfolio Analyzer, you could look at your selected portfolio projects and view them against resource capacity as portrayed by resources in the resource pool, and it would show you where there were over allocations. The way that the resource planning portions of the Portfolio Analyzer got resource data was from essentially a footprint for a project that was specified in a resource plan. So because engagements are going to phase out resource plans, the new Portfolio Analyzer functionality uses resource engagements for that footprint of resource information instead of resource plans. So that's a simple answer to that question. A couple other items Dan mentioned on the front end, that all existing tenants were going to be eventually migrated off of resource plans to resource engagements. Our understanding from Microsoft is that date is sometime in September. There's also one other date you should be aware of, and that is that currently, if you were to spin up a new Project Online tenant, it's going to start off with information existing in resource plans, but give you a ribbon bar in gold that always shows you that you have the ability to upgrade that to resource engagements. After April 1st, as of the last understanding on our part, all tenants that get spun up after April 1st will have engagements only. So there will be no more resource plans associated with new tenants after April 1st. Those dates are subject to change, and they are approximate at this point, so I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. And then lastly, as far as updates and comments, if you looked at the swim lane, the timelines rather that Dan showed, the multiple timelines, and you're looking for something that's more robust than that, we would point you to a company called visibility.biz. You could look them up on Bing. They have a really, really highly functional, effective swim lane timeline tool that really allows you to portray project data, resource data, other things like that as in swim lane timelines. Highly effective and well liked by pharma and some other verticals out there. So if you have needs to do much more with swim lanes and timelines than the product currently supports, we encourage you to go look at visibility.biz and look at their swim lane timeline tool. You can point that at project versions all the way back to 2007, I believe. You can point it at spreadsheets. You can point it at project MPP files. It's highly flexible. And I think, Dan, with that, we just wanted to talk about some upcoming webinars. We have two more webinars coming up. One in February, the 18th is a Thursday at 10 a.m. We're going to be talking about reporting in Project Pro for Office 365, showing some of the new features in recent versions regarding dashboarding and things along those lines. And then in March, on the 15th, we will be covering non-project work in Project Pro and managing that effectively. Most of our clients, enterprise clients, have combinations of project work as well as bucket projects, departmental projects, things that aren't really projects but that finance and other portions of the organization are looking to understand better. So there's definitely some fantastic advice from Dan about how to set up and manage those non-project items in Project Pro for Office 365. And then lastly, we're going to do a full tour of resource engagements, 2 hours of resource engagements content versus the 25 minutes we had for today or 20 minutes we had for today. So if you want to see it end to end in the tool, covering it at a very high level or a very detailed level, please join us in Edina for the MPUG session on the 18th. You can certainly let us know, send us an email if you're interested in attending that remotely. Currently, I believe it's intended to be an on-premises, on-site instructor-led thing, but it's possible if we have enough interest we could extend that to an online attach for that. Dan, any comments on the webinars that are coming up?
Nope, no comments.
Okay. Lastly, we just wanted to give you some links to follow. You can reach us at Milestone Consulting Group at education or at sales. You can also reach Dan Ranier at that email address and me, Dave Fisher, at the bottom email address. Molly Keel is the Microsoft person that you would contact for information about licensing and or setting up trials and or purchasing Microsoft Project or Project Online. Molly was not able to attend this rebroadcast of the webinar, and she will not be able to attend the February Thursday webinar either. So just wanted to make sure we continuously get her information out there as well about things. And Dan, I don't know if we had any other slide content. I think we're good to go. We've tried to address a few of the questions I got asked the first time around. We will make this webinar available to people who attended and had audio issues or things along those lines, or anyone else who is interested in viewing this. And the webinar in February will be coming up soon. Please sign up. If you never notice an Eventbrite email coming to your email address, those are the those are the invitations rather for the Milestone webinars. We currently have 3 total webinars on the calendar. If there's enough popularity and interest in these, we will extend these webinars out into the future and cover additional topics beyond Project Professional. We'll cover other Project Online and project topics as requested. So if you have interest in that, please send us a note, and we can look at extending the series beyond March. And also, we would love to hear your content or suggestions for content for those sessions. Thanks for attending. We look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.